Special council meeting to order. Roll call.
Here.
Here. Here.
Okay, if you happen to see in your Dropbox, Quickstar has made a reply. I'm going to ask Dex to come up to the podium and walk through that reply from Quickstar.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
If you lean the thing up a little toward, there you go.
I'm too
You should be
tall.
okay.
Right, thanks. Yep, as Mayor said, you've got some changes in front of you, some proposals from us. I'd like to call them concessions that I think it was Councilmember Steve made that, you know, we've been listening to the public, we've been listening to the comments from you as the city council, and this is what I feel we can come up with to compromise for some of the things that you guys have been talking about. First, really like to just remind you guys, Quickstar today meets all the city codes, all the ordinances, everything that the city staff has put together that we go off of to get to the point of submitting a civil plan to the city for a project, right? Secondly, we know the zoning was challenged. The BOA stood behind the zoning, and we know that we meet the zoning requirements today. Thirdly, you had a traffic study done. The traffic study showed really simply that College Drive is overbuilt and it's safe. And the 5 intersections that were studied have a level A with or without a Quickstar at this corner. So I think the safety things have been mostly answered. I think the traffic, you know, that extra 300 cars that the traffic study called out, I think we can safely say that all these intersections work, the traffic works. They showed that there was a warrant to a turn lane, left turn lane on the quarry. They also said that the intersection worked, right, with the Quickstar there without those left turn lanes. So I looked at DOT's data from 2005 to 2009 to 2017 to what the traffic study shows. There actually is more cars in that stretch from the bridge to Corey Street in 2005 than there is today. So there's been less traffic per DOT traffic count every year since 2005. So the trend is going backwards. And I think that's due to the city having more people walking, having more people biking. So
The road closed.
the road was closed. There could have been construction. All that stuff is in there, but you had almost 12,000 cars a day going through there in 2005. So those are those things that I think we've put to bed. And with that, here, you know, what I have in front of you today is what I feel is concessions from Quickstar. So I think the most important one, I heard multiple people say the fueling station's too big. 20 fueling locations is too much. So we took a pump out. We have 16 fueling locations here. We can't lower our height of what we can do is we can shrink the fascia. Okay, so I think that fascia is somewhere around 46 or 48 inches. You can decrease the depth of the upper. We just had to do it in Ames because we're considered a sign. Our canopy is considered a sign, and the sign height was 18.6 or something that we had to meet. So we can look at that option. That's something that's there. We've already done that, yeah.
Does that, if you mind me interrupting you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Does that still preserve the bathtub effect on your air conditioning units? You mentioned once that you enclose those in your facade so that there wasn't much noise.
That's on the store,
pollution.
not on the canopy. So on top of the canopy.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. On top of the canopy.
Canopy over the gas pumps counts as a sign?
Yep, what
Okay,
we do
thank you.
have on top of the canopy is the windshield wiper wash stuff for scrubbing your windows, those blue tanks up there, some you can see them if you're above them, some you can't. If we minimize that fascia, you're gonna see those up there a little bit more than you typically would. But that's literally to turn the hose on and off to fill those windshield cleaners. So that's something to consider up there. We might be able to get more low-profile tanks. I don't know. That'd be a question I can ask Store Engineering to see if we can do that. So I think that was one of the biggest ones, that I've heard from the public and from the council, that it just seems too big. So here we go. We minimize that. We've got 16 fueling locations. We're working with Alliant Energy. They have not committed, but they're very, very interested in putting 2 to 3 EV charging stations in. We don't have that commitment. We're working on it. They've looked at the site plan. They've decided to wait to see what happens at the 19th to make that commitment. And I don't know if that's because there's money that they have to allocate for or not, but we have them seriously interested in putting in EV charging stations, and that would go on that south end of the building, and on that parking lot there to the right as you look at.
Would you do that if Alliant did not, for whatever reason, given the fact that you're reducing the number of traditional fueling pumps by 4, would you consider putting in 2 EV chargers yourselves?
We can't sell electricity federally.
Gotcha.
I don't have a choice. So we have to partner with a power company or somebody like Tesla.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
Council members, Steve had talked about turning that sidewalk if we don't get to move any poles or bury any lines, talking about making that little S turn somewhat around the pole on that northwest corner. That would require giving us an easement to the city. We're okay with that. We can make that work. That's not a big deal. Staying on the sidewalks, keeping them raised across the driveways, that's a common thing that we do on site plans. So we have no issues doing that. I had my engineers quick look at that. We will have to raise the lot just a little bit to be able to do that, to make sure the water's running and staying on our site and going where it needs to go, but it's possible to make that happen. So that's no issue at all. We've got 3 driveways here. We can keep that across those driveways. The other thing that was mentioned was having that pedestrian crosswalk going across the parking lot and going to an entryway. We're showing that on that north vestibule entrance to the left of that. We can certainly stripe that and show that without a problem. We'll probably skinny up those parking locations so we can keep our number of parking that we need for this site plan. So the other thing that I'm showing on here is, I offered it before, was taking the car wash hours from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. so the folks up on the hill on Locust don't hear that noise.
Can you also shut the displays off at the same time?
Displays.
Oh, the TVs.
Yeah.
I think we can. I think keeping the site plan with the pumps on College Drive, I don't know if they would hear that. We certainly could trial run that, right? So if it's some kind of MOU that it is a problem after 10 o'clock at night, we can make that. I believe the store can actually turn those off. I know there is a mute button there as well for whatever. I hit the mute button all the time. Nobody heard me say that. I believe that can be done. We do have some decibel requirements in some communities where those have to be, they have to be quiet. I don't know if we have any where they actually have to be muted at a certain time. None of my projects have had that, but I know we can turn those down quite a bit. And some are too loud, and we can work on that. So that's something that I would like to know if it, after we're built, is that a problem? Is that not a problem? Can we tackle that from there? So The one thing that we can control would be some stores play music. Most of our in-town stores that are on the highway don't. We also have some people that love to have fun with the microphone and say, you know, pump ready at 5. We have pay at the pump now, so, or prepay, so you don't have as much of that. But that is something else that we can let the store know after 10 o'clock at night, there's no microphone or whatever that needs to be done. So, I just wanted to show the bike rack, so that northwest corner of the store, there is I think it's an 8 or a 12 bike rack. So that's there. I know that was questioned before. Crosswalk, I raised my hand a long time ago for the crosswalk. We're still up for paying for that crosswalk. What I'd like to hear from the council today is, would you prefer the crosswalk with the pedestrian aisle that Quick Trip builds and pays for, or would it be the street diet painting from Quarry Street to the bridge that gets done and paid for by Quick Trip, Quick Star? I would raise our hand for that. Not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. It's actually less expensive for us to stripe than it would be to build that crosswalk. So, and with that striping of the road diet, you still have that crosswalk. You just don't have your pedestrian island if you do go to the street diet. Ross, I know you've really talked a lot about that path in the back along the dike. We are required to give the city an easement with the release of those old easements to be able to access the dike. So there will be 15 feet there that is an easement to the city that could become public. I just have some concerns about that if it ever becomes a path and does continue on. Safety is probably my biggest concern. If you start getting people back there and it's dark, we don't have as many cameras in the back that are recording 24 hours a day like we do in the front. And where's that lead to? And will the folks to the south of us have the same requirements that we do for that? I personally think it's just much more safe to put people along the front of the store on College Drive where they walk today. I don't think you can stop people from walking on the dike. I think it's trespassing now today, but every time I'm through here, there's people on the dike. So my wish would be that the city works with the Corps and builds that walking path on the dike. It's where people are walking today, and I don't know if that can happen, but it just seems to make more sense for that. Again, I worry about the safety of that up there. So those are our Quick Star's concessions that we make. These are things that I've heard from you guys. This is, I'm hoping to get us across the finish line. So I'm open for questions.
Excuse me, is that curb between that 15-foot easement and Quick Star?
It is, just for stormwater requirements.
Thank you.
Yep, we keep the water on our site as much as we possibly can.
What's the red hashing on bike rack north of that?
The red hashing,
It's on the
here,
narrow
that
side.
walkway,
Okay, so you're adding
Come-
a new walkway there.
yep.
And the red over the driveways is implying what? To the-
Just to keep them raised, to keep them up.
Okay, so you'll
And
do the raised
Yep.
people, okay.
I did make a little side note. The engineer informed me that from our lot line to where the city sidewalk is about a 2-foot drop. So we'll have to find a way to make that work somehow there.
But Quickstar has engineers, right? You guys can probably figure it out.
I hope so, but again, we won't, on the city property, we'll have to get into a TLE or some kind of easement to be able to work on that.
Can I ask a question about the raised, I guess, passages across the pedestrian pathways across the aprons? You know, one of the things that our traffic, Bolton and Mink mentioned was that those served even better as a visible indicator that this was a potential pedestrian traffic conflict zone if they were visually delineated, as in striped in a different color, or just they looked more like a sidewalk going across. I think most Quickstar parking lots are blacktop. Is that
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, all concrete.
okay? I
Yep.
guess maybe I'm just wrong there.
So, it could be stained concrete, it could be
Yeah.
paint.
You're open to that, though. I mean, I just want to make sure we're following the traffic engineer's recommendations. So.
Yeah. Yep,
So it's
I think I
88.
would go off of what city staff recommends there to, you know, is there some stained concrete in the community? Is there painted concrete in the community? What, you know, what is that? We could go off of staff
So
recommendations.
that's eight, it would be,
Yes.
it'd be ADA from the sidewalk coming on Corey into the store at grade that way,
Yep,
within that lot, okay.
yep.
Yeah.
It actually would be cool if they were brick, I mean, not brick, but the color.
I'm, you know, I guess I don't want to turn this into like a back and forth or a debate or anything. I don't necessarily see everything the way that you see it in terms of the characterization of various parts of this, but I'll just say that my response is that I appreciate the ways in which you took seriously our requests for some modifications to the site plan and made some significant concessions. I think really appreciate the partnership that Quickstar's showing in making some of those concessions, and especially the ones that touch on pedestrian safety. The traffic engineer, you know, they said it's overbuilt. They didn't necessarily say it was safe, and that was the only thing that I kind of wanted to push back on. I know you asked us one particular question, which was, you know, do we have a preference on you building a crosswalk with an island versus paying for the restriping? I think we should punt that to city staff to determine what's in the best interest of the city given our long-term plans. I mean, my inclination is we want Quickstar to pay for the most expensive thing. But also, you know, it might be that there's a short-term version of the road diet and a long-term version of the road diet, and we don't want to pour any concrete that isn't part of the long-term version. So whatever city staff thinks is best is my preference there.
Yeah, that pedestrian island doesn't fit into the, I don't think, if you go to the road diet, can you work that in there? Have you looked at that? Yep.
We haven't looked at it in great detail. I think it can, there's some challenges for them, but
What this rectangle is?
Jeremy, we do have a couple on Zoom.
This?
I'll give you my spot. Yeah, I'll repeat. So it can be done. There could be some challenges incurred on putting a pedestrian island in there with the road diet.
What's the rectangle to the east of the pumping?
East, the rectangle.
East of the charging stations, maybe.
South of the,
South of the subway.
oh, that's Subway?
No. Oh.
That's Pizza Ranch. To the straight south of, to the east of us is Pizza Ranch. Yeah, Pizza.
He's asking about this rectangle
Oh.
right here.
Those are our tanks. Those are underground tanks that will go there. That allows our delivery to come around the back of the store and then somewhat park over those tanks and then
Not interfering with traffic.
try and stay out of the traffic route. Yep.
Can you point to, is it the? Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
what I thought, okay.
Those are, we're just showing where our underground tanks would go. So I know there was some talk about burying some electrical lines. That's a super expensive thing. I think there's a huge challenge there with some of the lines that are there. Travis noted that some of the lines might be new. We're gonna look into a utility easement. If Alliant partners and comes with an EV charging station, there's probably a better chance that we can get some of those lines buried. They need to be underground. That's something we've got to continue to work through. I know we've got some challenges. We have a light pole, we have a fire hydrant. We've got some things to move. But this pole in that northwest corner or southwest corner is going to be a challenge, I think. But we'll certainly try to partner with the city and Alliant Energy and see what we can get done.
Have you gone and kind of, I haven't done it yet, but have you gone and just pulled up there and kind of within the general proximity of where the ingress egress driveway will be right there to see if you felt like the sight line was hampered by that pole?
It's been there for a long time, and there's only been 28 crashes in 10 years. And
Right, but you're changing the proximity of the driveway within relationship to that pole. So have you like physically gone and looked at it? I have not,
I guess when I pull out of there, I haven't really,
because right now you're,
yeah.
it's not in your direct line of sight, but the pole is much closer in relation to the new driveway.
It's going to be the power company that really determines if that pole can go or not. And then the challenge is, where do you get the power box? What do you?
The pole that would be gone if we buried, or the pole that has to be moved to do the,
I don't know. I don't know which.
okay.
I don't know.
I'm confused
I just
what
know
pole
that
you're
there's a
talking about.
pole
There's
right
two
at
poles
the,
along there.
basically right at the exit. And
Oh, on that southeast exit?
yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to move that pole or bury lines to get to somewhere else, yeah. And that'll be on us at that
so
point.
that pole won't be there for sure.
That pole won't be there.
Okay.
It could get moved one way or the other depending,
Right, but it's
Again,
not
on
going to
the
be in line of
engineering.
sight of the driveway.
yeah, right,
Okay.
correct. Yeah, you can't put it,
Okay.
And it wouldn't be, I would assume, even if you just had to get rid of that pole, burying there, you have to take those wires out anyway. So burying right there at a minimum.
we haven't looked at the engineering of
Okay.
the lines and which way and who they serve and how we have to disconnect and connect, so we'll leave that up to the power company when we get there. Do you have any comments, Travis?
We've asked for that number from, have we gotten an update? I would say we've been asking for that number from Alliant on what they charge for undergrounding. As Dustin with Alliant had indicated, those are pretty new overhead lines. And so it would be a cost borne by somebody. Alliant more than likely wasn't going to bear that cost themselves.
Unless maybe they're gonna put in some EV chargers, in which case maybe they're,
If Alliant's coming, I think there's probably an easier partnership there.
yeah.
Yeah, and if we were lucky enough that that power pole on that southwest corner was the main line,
Right.
it might help us.
Yeah.
Again, I don't have those answers, but we're looking into that. We may not be able to do anything there.
Right. If it can't be undergrounded, it's not a deal killer for me. I would like it, but I really want to make sure that that pole's not there as a sight line for that driveway. To me, that's.
Yeah, we work around that a lot. On a lot of our sites, we work around.
I was pulling up the picture, that's what I was looking for, of the fascia on the canopy. So I'm just holding up, this is what you're talking about here, right? And you can make that thinner?
Skinny, yep.
Skinnier. Okay, I appreciate that. And I do want to say, echo Councilperson Zittigren's, I really do appreciate this. One, I know that you took it upon yourself, even after the first meeting, to contact Alliant. And I think Quickstar has truly shown a partnership, and I really appreciate that. I think you're listening, which is fantastic. And I really hope that if this moves through, right, we can continue to be partners, and I feel like Quickstar has shown that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? How about on your end?
So last week when we had this discussion, the whole concept behind tonight was to have kind of a straw poll, essentially. And as council members, a number were discussed that night, and if there were any others that were brought up. And so do want to run through a couple, one being, and I've got these broken up in a couple of different categories, one being site plan, physical specific, the other being operationally, and then another category of what I would call, physical outside the site plan. And number of them have already been addressed, but I do want to run through them quickly. Number of pumps, as it's being now proposed, because Quickstar is amending their site plan submission to the current revisions we've seen, right?
Correct.
Okay, so as it is today, it is proposed 16 pumps or 8 filling stations, however you want to define it.
8 pumps, 16 fueling locations.
Thank you.
But
Thank
a
you.
4-bay, it's a 4-bay plan, not a
Yes.
5-bay.
Matches what you currently have in town today.
Yep.
So, do council members, do you want to run through one at a time and provide comments on each individual segment? Or we are a bit on a time constraint, is silence affirmation?
I think that everyone's probably pleased that there's some reduction. I mean, or at least those of us who were concerned about it. In terms of the total size of the site plan, we're still at 3.44 acres versus 1.13 and 1.64 acres for the other two in town. So more than twice the size of either, other store, whether or not the pumps change. I'm just observing that. I don't think it'll change anything.
Any other comments from council members on number of
Silence
pumps?
is golden.
Okay. And I don't mean to sound like I'm downplaying, it's just trying to keep moving things along. Electric vehicle chargers, you've seen and heard, current discussion, any comments?
Thank you for looking into it.
Thank you, it's awesome. Just a comment to Alliant in the general vicinity, please work with us on this one.
It's nice to see partners.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any contact from Alliant, I mean, I can give you the contact from the person for the EV. If you want to reach out to them and encourage them to commit, if we get through September 19th.
Yeah, they know who we
I
are.
will give you her contact. She's actually super easy and she's very responsive.
Any other comments? Okay, visibly delineated at-grade crossings across aprons. There was brief discussion on paint versus stained concrete you want the whole stretch, at the individual apron crossing itself. I don't know if there might be additional benefit if it's just the segment that's crossing the driveway that has that visual break, so that it just stands out to all parties involved.
I think that's what you're asking for.
I think that's what Bolton and Menk suggested, and I think that's wise. Now, looking at our own streets and how long striping lasts in our harsh winters, I think staining seems to be more of a permanent solution,
Yes.
and I think that'll be fewer headaches for everyone.
It's harder maintenance for us because the stain doesn't last with salt like regular concrete does. You can't, what I've been told is you can't mix some of the things that need to combat the salt and the sand.
Well, I mean, here's where I'll say, Quickstar's reputation is good in your stead. I've never seen poorly painted lot lines. I mean, when things start to fade, you fix them. So
Yeah.
I'm fine with your preference there if my fellow council members are.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I mean, I think it matches your color scheme anyway, right? I mean, our city has that sort of brick red look to it.
And as opposed to
Crosswalk.
stain, if you do dyed concrete as opposed to stained concrete.
We struggle with all of it, but we can do it. It's just, it's a 20-year maintenance, issue for us. It just doesn't hold the salt. If you
Okay.
drive around the communities that have it through their crosswalks, just take a look at it. They're usually in rough shape. But if that's the request.
If you and staff can come up with something that works for both of you, I'm happy with it.
Okay. Any other comments on that one?
I agree, it looks better.
Yeah.
All right, pedestrian wayfinding to store. I believe that was specific to the access on the north side of the store there off of Quarry Street. Any other comments?
We're getting really finicky here. Is that just striping? Or are you planning on a colored, path there too, or what?
We
What are you
typically
thinking?
stripe those.
Okay, thank you.
I think the yellow probably screams slow down more than
Yep.
stained concrete does.
Yep.
Any other comments? All right, no digital advertisement board, and I believe that's in relation to the initial request
Correct.
that showed the, loaf of bread, 69 cents, bananas for 39 or whatever. That has been removed from the site plan,
Correct.
and I don't know if the concern was also possibly an after-the-fact change, which would still have to go through Board of Adjustments process anyway, because our code prohibits that type of sign. Correct, John? With,
I'll defer to Greg on that.
yeah.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't pop up, I'm good.
All right. Let's see here. Ross Road / trail easement along levee. I think that's already been discussed a little bit. Any other comments, questions along that one?
Just a personal appeal, Tate, I know it's your land or the land that you own adjacent. It's not part of the scope of this process or anything like that. But if there's any way that we could work with you on that barn to make something working back, I think it'd be beneficial. But I appreciate Quickstar's offer for the 15-foot.
Okay, any other site plan specific physical items council members want to discuss?
I do like the narrow fascia on the, I don't know how other members feel if they want to see the picture. But I think just in terms of the view of the bluffs and not, I mean, I think in one way, decreasing the size of the puffs, and if you do that, you just draw more attention to the store, which I think is of more interest in gas pumps, personally. So I would be for the smaller fascia on it.
Yeah. Going back to the 15-foot easement, I can't speak for the Corps, but I might assume that they don't want anything in that 15-foot area other than grass because of the levee.
Don't we have a trail on the other side, though?
I
We
think
have
to-
one in the basin. We don't have one on the outside of the levee.
And I think we'd have to call it a maintenance access, correct, Jeremy?
Yeah, since Katrina, they've been really stringent about what you can put in that 15 feet. We have a street within 3 feet in some area, and then the bike trail, I believe, is beyond 15 feet.
And they may not want people. They may not want anything but grass there. They may not want a path like we have on top of the levee now, which they probably aren't happy about either. But,
Probably not, but
Yeah.
it'd be a conversation we can certainly have with them to see what our options are. But access roads that's the primary goal of keeping this 15 feet is that for flood fighting. So.
And that's actually a great segue also into the easement discussion. So this was brought up lightly a while back, that there were some easements being discussed. And so at the last, 29th work session, or maybe it was the actual 6th council meeting, the formal requests and staff recommendations were considered on there. There's a number of them that are related to the 1947 and 40 some odd flood control improvements. I do want to make note that those easements, the staff's recommendation of go ahead and doing away with those is, and it states specifically a staff recommendation, if given this additional 15-foot easement for the levee, because we don't currently have that in place. So there's a number of those that are identified that were in the council packet at the last meeting as well.
Travis, I sent you something where I'm still working with the engineer on where all the easement lines go, but this somewhat gives that, I guess, feel of where the easements would be. So you would have access from our road, right, to come up and get onto, if it's driving over the curb or if we need to make a curb cut, you would have this 15 feet here. This line here represents the base of the levee. So he was thinking this whole entire thing, but we're gonna have our stormwater pond here. You've got those inlets here. So we're trying to figure out how do we minimize that, and we'll work with you guys on what that looks like and how you need to get access to that. But we're certainly gonna have our drive aisle back here working with our seller, and he has to work with Pizza Ranch. You know, we're gonna have another 40-foot or 35-foot easement that is gonna be on that back drive that we're currently working through, and we'll start working with the seller and the neighbors on that as well.
So Jeremy, would that work? Would that provide enough room if the trail were to, the trail and the visioning dock concept?
Yeah, I think that 15 feet, I mean, our concern, of course, is access to the levee, but I think there'd be adequate, because there's gonna be nothing else in there. But yeah, our concern was the 15 feet, the access to, we actually have culverts to the south behind Pizza Ranch that we'd like to maintain access to from a couple different locations. And then the culverts to the north. And I think the one thing maybe that's not shown, although it was on our list, there is actually another pipe that crosses here, an existing storm sewer pipe that we just want to make sure it doesn't get excluded.
Okay.
But yes, there's a short answer.
So in all of those easements that are out there, they're basically blanket easements. We're gonna clean all those up and offer those easements back in a clear picture, and then those will be recorded documents that everybody can go find in a replat or a plat. So we'll really clean that up from what it is today. There's going to be some.
It'll be in your best interest for flood protection too.
Yeah, we're going to be out of the floodplain, right? We'll be out of that when we raise the lot a little bit. Certainly want, you know, we need to work with the neighbors, we need to work with the city for access, and we've got to do what the Corps needs us to do, right? So we'll get there. We've got a six foot easement for an emergency easement for Pizza Ranch. I think their emergency exits walk out onto the grass on that side of the building. So we've got all those. We've drawn them all up. We just got to start working with the neighbor and the seller when we get to that point.
And that was one of the easements listed on there on the gas pipeline to make sure that an easement was still maintained for Pizza Ranch. That was one of the, again, staff recommendations that vacation would be okay as long as another one was recorded as part of it to give that access to.
And that's also providing egress out of their parking lot through your lot, correct?
We won't own behind that. Tade will own behind that. So that'll be between Pizza Ranch and Tade.
Okay.
But
So
they
they'll-
will allow to go across ours once they cross his lot.
Okay,
So
'Cause
we'll
we're
give
not-
that, we offered that easement to Pizza Ranch.
okay. So we don't know whether they're landlocked with one ingress, egress.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, but the easements that were recorded were specific to the utilities themselves. Access easements are, an easement is not an easement. And so if I have an easement that says, yes, you can run this storm drain through here, it doesn't allow me to go ahead and build a driveway on it as well.
Correct. I don't think we saw any access easements affecting Pizza Ranch that involve the Quick Star location. They're all utility easements and flood control, sidewalk easement, patio easement.
Legally, I'm not sure, but if I go to Pizza Ranch right now and I park in back or along the side, and because of the way the parking goes, sometimes it makes more sense to go out the back and cut around by Usgard and Smith.
So legally today, you're trespassing because there's not an easement in place.
Okay. I'm driving on someone else's gravel road. Okay.
I just want to go back to something you said, just so that it's not a red flag for anybody watching or hearing this. When you said that you were in a floodplain and you had to raise the site, you're not filling in an area that's not allowed to fill in.
No, today, I think 90% of that's probably out of the floodplain where the store sits today.
Sorry, to be clear, it's not actually the floodplain, it's
Oh.
an interior ponding zone that's part of our
Okay, there you go.
preliminary.
I
Let's
just-
be
I
real
went in
clear
a
about the
meeting-
language here.
In a meeting, I just wanted to clarify so that if anyone listening or came back to listen to this meeting, they didn't say.
We're legal to build there.
You are,
Yes,
yes. And I
yes.
knew that. I just wanted to make sure that that was not
Right.
caught off the record in a weird way.
Thank you.
Yes.
John, Oh, you had a list. Go ahead and keep
No,
going.
I was going to ask if there are any other questions along those lines.
Yeah, quick question for John. Approving of this site plan doesn't necessarily mean approving of every operational decision that Quickstar makes with regard to the volume of its televisions or the operation of its car wash. And I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct, that if, let's say, a year from now, we have lots and lots of noise complaints related to the operation of the facility, could we pass ordinances, in terms of operation hours of nuisance laws related to noise from the car wash or video screens?
Generally, I would say yes. What I'd be concerned about, you don't want to necessarily retroactively outlaw something that's already been allowed, but noise is something a little different because we have a noise. We don't have a decimal level, and we've talked about this before, how that's tough to enforce, and I think there could be an issue. But you're going to have that issue regardless of whether you approve the site plan or not. I don't think the site plan is going to be an issue with that ordinance down the road. We've got to take a look at that ordinance anyway about decimal levels. Interesting question, but I think that would go for a lot of activities in Decorah. Air conditioners, how loud are they now? And if you want to pass a new ordinance, are you going to be outlawing air conditioners that currently are allowed? I think that would be okay. I think that would be okay, but certainly somebody would have a defense if they said, for 20 years you've allowed us to do this and it hasn't been a complaint. I mean, you could make an argument it's like it's grandfathered in, I could see. So it's a tough question. I can't give you a straight answer on that, on whether or not. But certainly by passing an ordinance in the future, we can provide the public and property owners clear guidance on what is acceptable and what is not. And right now it's complaint driven. So I think you could allow them to put in a car wash, and if it comes out that we got all sorts of complaints, it's a subjective standard we have now, but that's how you get factual arguments about whether it's truly bothersome to the reasonable person. It's a vague standard, but it is a legal standard.
Okay, thank you.
Travis, is that what you had on your list? Do you have other things to go through?
That was one of the items, the volume. Let's see here. Any other physical characteristics of the site council members want to discuss? Okay. The next was operational specific to the site. Car wash hour, I believe the two kind of go hand in hand on the noise side. Car wash hours as well as pump advertisements and those television advertisements on them. So I believe they were all tied to the sound and making sure that it didn't disrupt the area. Would I be correct in that?
Right, and I wasn't sure what our options are for I know sometimes it's weird. Sometimes the things are really loud, the screen things, and sometimes you can barely hear them. So is there a way that we can keep them at the lower level than you can hear them?
I believe there is.
Okay.
I guess I would encourage maybe an MOU is a better way of doing that than tying somehow the volume or duration of these things to a site plan. So I would encourage staff to, having heard our input, identify an appropriate avenue for ensuring that nighttime operation is appropriate for the neighborhood setting, and making sure that's reflected in a memorandum.
I think the morning operation too, I think a 7 rather than 6 is a much more reasonable for the residential area.
And this might be more a question of John talking about with noise and what the city has used in the past is a code section 92810 for reference, disturbance of peace. Is that something that could be given to Quickstar? Should an MOU be established that says generally, that says here are the expectations of both parties?
The challenge is what's the objective standard you're going to use? I mean, we've had some noise complaints about activities in that area that have gone on before, and the question is, how far away can you hear the noise? If it's a block away at midnight, that's a little different than maybe in the middle of the day. And can you hear the noise inside the house versus outside the house? I mean, these are all things I think we've struggled with before with, frankly, with Roscoe's. Yeah, they can have music inside, but then once you can hear that music on the street, is that a disturbance? Or is it when it's across the street? Or is it when you get to a residence? I think this property, because it's adjacent, it's across the street from some residences, if they can hear it, that's gonna, I'm not saying just 'cause they hear it, it is a violation, but it strongly would indicate, it would be a strong argument that it might be. But that's the challenge of also having commercial property adjacent to residential.
So some of the things that we've done in the past would be a memorandum of understanding with the city, in writing that 12 months it gets reviewed, and you sit down and you look and how many complaints are there, and can we make an adjustment, or is it going just fine? And in my projects, after 12 months, we didn't make any changes. There was a car wash in Janesville that everybody was worried about, and we showed decibels, and maybe I can find this and share it with you, Travis, so you can share it with the group, but the drier decibels were less than Milwaukee Road decibels of the cars traveling, the motorcycles going by, than the actual dryer noise. So we worked with that, and once it was in place, we went back to staff and they said, no complaints. So it just gives you a calendar reminder if you get into some kind of MOU, and gets you to go back after it and look at it and try to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
Something to encourage.
Yeah, we have garbage trucks that run at 5 a.m. too.
Yeah.
So,
And they've been living next to Roscoe's for a long time.
yeah.
We actually had a guy that was for us, and he videoed and put on YouTube the garbage truck coming at 4:30 in the morning, and he had a decibel reader out there, and it's louder than anything that we could possibly have on our site. So,
Well,
Their backup beep.
yeah.
that's true, but I don't think just because there's one bad thing that we need in order to get the garbage out of our neighborhood means that we need to therefore tolerate constant or daily, noises up to that volume. I lived right across the street from Roscoe's, and I knew that Friday nights and Saturday nights were not great nights for me to plan for a perfect night's sleep. Quick Star, I think you're open 7 days a week, a lot of hours, and so I think what we can expect in terms of your neighborhood is a little different. I'll use an example of Don's Towing. I used to live right across the street from Don's Towing. I know Don, pretty personally, and I think with the exception of nighttime accidents, he was conscientious about, the operation of the heavy machinery in his back lot, because that's where people are sleeping. And we expect of all of our commercial, residents that they be good neighbors, just as we expect the same of our residential residents.
We can be conscious what we can control. We can't be conscious of the, Harley Davidsons that pull in at 2 o'clock in the morning and rev their motors up after they fuel up. We can't control that. So those are things that we're just not going to be able to, yell out the window or use the loudspeaker to say, hey, don't rev your motors or peel out of the parking lot.
So is council supportive of an MOU to be drafted for consideration on the hours of operational issues?
Yes.
Okay. Last category I've got here are physical improvements off-site but corresponding. The RRFB, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at Quarry Street and College, which, as Dax noted before, and this blends into the next one, the left turning lane cost share. As Dax stated earlier, Quickstar is proposing one or the other. Jeremy telling me if I'm wrong, but I think staff's recommendation would be the RRFB. And, the question on the 4 to 3 lane conversion, with the pedestrian island as part of Bolton and Mink study, as they noted, if you go to a 3-lane conversion, the pedestrian island isn't required. And with the rapid flashing beacons, the purpose of those is to stop traffic to get pedestrian all the way across, not stop them in the middle and then have them push the button again. Right, Jeremy? That's what. Did I speak out of turn at all? Perfect.
Could we put the beacon on an island? So it's in the middle? Because unless you're saying 2 flashing beacons,
Yeah.
how do you, is that what it would be?
I'd even go as far as maybe even a crossbar overhead. Just a little crossbar.
Yeah, there are a variety of configurations, but what we had priced out in our initial concepts was 1 on each side of the road.
Okay,
Nothing in the middle.
okay, but as
Just
long as there's
standard.
2,
Yeah, 1 on each side.
So it's a
that face-
clear-
They face both directions. Yeah.
We do already have an example on Montgomery Street of a road dieted 3-lane road with an islanded crossing. And I will say, as someone who crosses there quite often, that island does actually seem to make it feel a lot more psychologically and maybe actually safe. So to the extent that an island could be incorporated into a road diet plan, you know, that's maybe just something you need to mess around with, Jeremy. But to the extent it could be, I'd like us to pursue it. I think it makes for a safer intersection. Or
My
crossing.
only concern about, yeah, I'm on. My only concern about the road diet, the 3-lane road diet, is it doesn't offer, I don't think, the protection of that left-hand turn off a quarry that the 4-lane plan does.
That's when I mentioned challenges earlier with that. That is the challenge. I think we can look at that and look at turning radius with the extra width and the extra shoulder on the side. I think we could make it work, but that would be the concern we'd have as well.
And I think that's not something I'm willing to give up. I really think that left-hand turn needs to be safer.
Well, and I think we talked last time, you said you might be able to combine them both, right? I mean, we talked about,
Yeah, we just haven't had a chance to look
Yeah.
at what kind of turning radius we'd have off of the Quarry Street and left hand. Where the island would be, we can't push it too far to the south and move the crosswalk. So we just haven't had a chance to look at that.
It seems
detail
like
yet.
we can let staff make the determination.
Yep.
But you've heard that if possible, we'd like to have cake and eat it.
and it does seem like regardless of what we do, that seems the direction where we'd like contribution.
That's what I was going to get at. But council wants contribution towards the crossing as opposed to the striping of the whole length, correct?
If that's staff's recommendation, that's what I want.
Would you agree with that, Jeremy? Yeah.
as offered.
Okay,
And then,
just noting time.
yep, left turning lane cost share. This was, Dax presented the alternative. Instead of paying for improved crosswalk, pay for the entire length of striping, which equated to, what was that dollar amount, Jeremy?
28.
I would say 20, because the crosswalk was 28.
So the only thing I do have a question about in this area, and I feel like if we know that we just need to come to an agreement in this area, I feel like we could move on. But I do want to, I think back to Kirk's point, this idea of if we pull out a curb from Corey, right? I would like to see that be a real curve, not done with paint. There.
And pedestrian island, again, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, is in the middle of the road.
Right,
That's not a
right.
bump out. So if we're talking pedestrian refuge islands, that's not part of that discussion of bringing a bump out off of the corners.
No, I was just thinking in terms of the left-hand turn, that area, if we're talking about Corey Street, but you might just be talking about paying for the painting, in which case I still say the crosswalk, but.
Option B, the other one. Option B had that green. Is that what you were talking about?
I am. When Kirk and
Yeah.
I think, brought up last time that we like the diet, but we want to leave in that pullout, right? If that's possible. But you haven't had a chance to look at it, so we haven't seen it. That's why it's hard to comment
Yeah,
about
I
this.
think that would be our preference too, is to stay push as far to the west as we can, right? When we showed this option, option A, we centered it in the middle of the road, so we have equal shoulders on each end. What we haven't looked at yet is can we slide the entire setup to the west, and then you'd have a wider shoulder on the east, which would be the Quarry Street side, and then you could effectively have that bump out. So that we just
Yeah.
haven't looked at yet.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, and that's, I had undergrounding of utilities as the last discussion item for off-site physical. Any other items which we had discussed before? Any other items that council has?
No, but I would say, I mean, I talked a little bit about native plantings. I think it's a me thing, but I would say that with the reduction in pumps, which I really appreciate, there will be more space on site, and the greener you can make that space, that would be a preference. I mean, I don't know how we require you to, well, I mean, I guess I'd like to see you more green space if possible, or think about, I know right now on the site plan it's just trees, but how do we make it fit with the landscape, and really think about bringing in some natural plantings or environments in that way.
That's all the
Okay.
pre-submitted ones I had.
Probably get rid of that parking in the back on that north side and make that more green, like around the pond.
That'd be awesome.
I was thinking that's where the EV would go, but that's too far from the front of the store.
Right, so the EV would be over here. Yeah, that'd be awesome and appreciated.
Okay. Thank you to the council. Thank you to Dax. Motion to, okay.